Good Thursday afternoon to you. Welcome to KXAN Live. Breaking news, we got to get to this, and we're just going to go right into it. Roger Wallace joining me here in the KXAN Live studio. Texas, Oklahoma joining the SEC. It's actually happened pretty fast in the
Really
spectrum
fast.
of how these things normally work, but we've been on quite a ride for the last week.
Yeah, when you think about last Wednesday and everybody's looking at that story that broke from the Houston Chronicle, trying to process it to today, a week and a day later, where the SEC votes 14-0 in favor of extending that invitation. Tomorrow, the Board of Regents, both here in Austin and in Norman, will no doubt rubber stamp it, and then here we go. When will it happen? How much money will it cost Texas and OU to get out before what the SEC release said is starting in the 2025 school year? Can't imagine you're going to have 4 years of Texas and OU in the Big 12. So those stories, what does it look like? Does it go to the pod system as we've seen, 4-team pods, or does it just simply go to 2 8-team divisions, move Alabama and Auburn to the east, and it's east and west? But the bottom line here, Andrew, is, and I was thinking about this, January 2nd, Texas changes football coaches. April, they change basketball coaches, and July, they change conferences. That's pretty seismic in less than a year.
Yeah, Roger, you've been here for over 25 years. Did you ever think that you would see Texas connected to the SEC?
Well, maybe 10 years ago when all this
Right.
was going down and we thought something was going to happen, but certainly not in the last 5 or 6 years. It just seemed like things were pretty stable. I guess the undercurrent, Andrew, of the Big 12 and how satisfied was Texas when you take a look at the big picture, the home schedule in the Big 12, knowing that you're never going to have the Oklahoma game in Austin, so it's always going to be the rest of the Big 12. And Iowa State can be a top 10 team. TCU can be a top 10 team. Oklahoma State, but it's still not going to get the fans as excited as if you have an SEC schedule. And then just the 30,000-foot view of college athletics, where it's heading. I think name, image, and likeness, I think that is a huge component here. Let's be honest. Now athletes can get paid, so the undercurrent storylines of college athletics suddenly are right out in front of us now.
The biggest story that kind of started with it is Texas A&M's response. Now, we have no really way of confirming, but the feeling is that A&M probably put this out in some sort of way last week, and we're immediately on the aggressive, saying, we don't want this. We want to be the only school in Texas, and that stance kind of softened as the days went on. I was in school when Texas and Texas A&M played. Now it feels like it's foreign to most people, but I got to imagine that's a feeling of excitement from both fan bases, really, when you boil down to it.
Yeah, I was there in 2011, and I've kind of contended that they're saying the right things, but I don't think Texas wanted to have anything other than the Justin Tucker memory embedded
That's
in
true.
their head when it comes to the game. Now, if it's a bowl game or bigger picture, a playoff, you can't control that. And I think A&M, even though they have that bad taste in their mouth, they're the SEC. They don't want to play Texas anymore. So I think there's a lot of people saying they want the game back, primarily in Austin. But deep down, I'm not sure if either of them really wanted it back, and now they're not going to get a choice.
It does feel like there was a lot to lose, I felt like. But now in this situation, if you're playing off, and at least, from a personal perspective, I was looking forward to this game being back. We talked a little bit about the divisions and what's next, timeline. How quickly, as quick as we went with this week of things changing, how quickly do you think these other details are going to come out?
We look at precedent, and A&M and Missouri 1 year, Nebraska 1 year, but they were leaving conferences that weren't going anywhere. This has gotten so messy with the Big 12 that I think it might be different. So I'll hedge my bets and say 2 years, but probably the likely scenario is next year, just because I think both schools want to get moving with their future. When you talk about recruiting, you're recruiting a kid to play 2 years of Big 12 and 2 years of SEC, 1 year. So a lot of things have to happen, but this is the old, you get the lawyers in the room, and we haven't heard from Texas other than they released the letter that they submitted. Tomorrow the Board of Regents will meet, as we said, and then I'm not sure we'll get much more then a statement after that. I don't know if they're ready to answer all those questions. Now, something's going to happen because a week from tomorrow they start football practice, and Steve Sarkisian's going to get out in front of the media. And if this hasn't been addressed, even though it will be addressed with him, you would think he's not going to be the first guy to have to speak on it. But my best guess is, like everyone else, 2, more likely 1, can't imagine 4 of Big 12 play left for both schools.
And the aftermath of this is what's going to happen with the Big 12, and where it goes from here. This is a crippling blow in the sense of revenue and lots of different aspects of it. Now, normally in these deals you get politicians involved and everything else, but this time no such case.
They might get involved, but I'm not sure
it's not
how much they can accomplish.
Sure, that's right. What, in your opinion, happens to the Big 12 now? This is all speculation. We have no real knowledge of what's going to go on, but what do you think will happen?
It was interesting. Again, this is at warp speed, so 8 days, everything has changed. Early on, it was, okay, Kansas has been in contact with the Big Ten. Texas Tech seems like a good match, as best as you can do for the Pac-12. TCU and Baylor are wild cards because they're private. Iowa State leaning Big Ten as well. But again, do these conferences want to add just to add? They got to add value because they got to share the money with more schools. So I guess my best guess is the latest storyline coming out that maybe the American is a big player in this, the American Athletic Conference, or somehow the Big 12 can attract 2 or 4 schools and kind of get the best that they can get and realize that technically they'll be a Power 5, an autonomous 5, but maybe not perception-wise. I think they're going to do everything they can to stick together. They've got the TV deal through 2024. So even if Texas and OU aren't part of it, they've still got that deal.
We did talk about this just a couple moments ago. Just the traditions and everything else about the SEC. It's something different. Do you have a place that you're excited to go to?
Well, I think
the SEC.
I think you got to start just because they've dominated college football. So see what Tuscaloosa is all about. But then after that, I would say Athens and Gainesville, Florida and Georgia would be up there. Been to Oxford, Mississippi. Texas played Ole Miss on the road. Didn't get to go to Baton Rouge because of COVID last year. Been to Arkansas, going back to Arkansas. That should be interesting, right? A different element on September 11th when Texas and Arkansas play. So I'll give you the obvious is Tuscaloosa just because, they're dominating, and then I'd say the other 2 are Georgia and Florida. Now, you can speak to some firsthand experience covering the SEC.
Athens, there's a great place that makes crepes. I love eating crepes in
Now you're
Athens.
trying to go Craig Way on us.
That's why I feel like I should throw that in as a nod to Craig. Athens is up there with the best. Oxford is also great. I was covering the University of Georgia for 5 years, working in Georgia. I never got to go to Knoxville, so that would be probably if it's at its peak, right? Like if Tennessee is at its best, that to me that would be probably number 1. I've got to see Auburn. I got to see and Mississippi State doesn't do much for me. I'm trying to think of anyone else that could,
Vanderbilt, Missouri.
You've been there, yeah. And then going back to, I guess Kyle Field would probably be.
Well, and here's the other thing, because we talk about where they're going, and that kind of goes back to our point about what's it going to look like.
Yeah.
Because with 16 teams, you can go a long time without playing everybody on their home field, just because of the moving of the puzzle pieces. So how's that going to? Are you going to be able to sell to a recruit? You will get to play. Not only play Alabama, you certainly can't guarantee. I wouldn't think you're going to play at Alabama if that's a big thing.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting with 16 teams how, if they have it set up in 2 divisions, you can go years without going to see another place.
And that's what I don't know which of our national writers came up with the pod concept, but at least with the pods, in a 4-year career, you would at least get to go. You would play each team once. That if it's set up where you're playing the 3 every single year, and you have if we're still staying with an 8-team schedule in the conference, and you have one main rival outside of that pod that you play every year. So in this case, if A&M and Texas weren't in the same pod, they could still play each other every year.
Boy, how do you not go 9? In the SEC. I mean, I know
with 16,
I know they like their 8. They like that November game to kind of get well. But man, you are really just standing on top of a mountaintop, kind of being obvious if you don't
Right.
go to a 9-game schedule when you have 15 other opponents. And then, hey, there's some other sports that are involved that are pretty big too.
Yeah, and tell me about how this will affect, the Big 12 basketball had created itself as the dominant conference
And
in
the
basketball.
best format, if you ask me.
Sure. Home and
double round
home,
robin.
yes. How will this affect those other sports?
Well, it's still SEC is going to be a great conference in basketball, but you could argue that the Big 12, especially with just 10 from top to bottom. Oh, by the way, the reigning national champs are sitting up in Waco right now. So, I don't know what you gain. Kentucky hasn't been Kentucky in a few years. That's the first one you think of when you think of the SEC. So, I don't know how it looks. The way Chris Beard has got off and rolling without, coaching a game, you got to figure the other SEC coaches are standing up and taking notice of that. And Oklahoma, also, Perry Mosier coming from Loyola, he's gotten it done there, so no reason to believe he can't get things rolling. And then here's something I thought about today, Andrew. Hey, Coach Schaefer, want you to meet one of your
Right.
fellow conference coaches. Her name's Kim Mulkey. Maybe you've heard of her. So suddenly
Right back. They tried to get away, and they
right
couldn't.
back with her again eventually.
Um,
Baseball.
that's right.
You talk about a gauntlet. That's going to be incredible, and the atmospheres in the SEC. To me, that's where it's maybe more different. If you go from how big of a difference is it, maybe you could argue baseball is the biggest difference when you talk about conference atmospheres. Football is great, but you can have a great atmosphere in Austin, Texas. You can have a great atmosphere in Norman. 50,000 seat stadiums can have a great atmosphere. They can be really live, but in baseball you don't get many like you get in the SEC.
We're going to wrap it up here in the next couple minutes, but what is it going to take for Texas to compete? And we're talking football at the level that Texas fans expect them to.
Well,
in the SEC.
What I've been saying now is you're recruiting against SEC schools, but you're not recruiting against the conference. So if there are kids out there that strike one for Texas is the conference they're playing in, suddenly that's not a strike. Now, they've been down for 10 years. You think about,
Right.
ironically, since Colt McCoy went out of, oh, by the way, the game that started this Alabama run in the Rose Bowl in the national championship game. So, Sark's got a little SEC experience. What was going on back in January when that move was made? You can certainly try to connect the dots. We'll never know. But now they got to get it done on the field, and they've got everything at their disposal to sell recruits. You cannot now say, well, it's the Big 12. What you can say is, geography. You're not going to have as many handy games for friends and family to drive to as you do in the Big 12 conference. So that's kind of the give to the take.
Right. Kind of set the table for us if anyone's tuning in late. So obviously Texas and Oklahoma were officially accepted by the SEC now, and then we're pretty much done. But then tomorrow, what has to take place for this to get certified? I guess?
Both sets of regents, Texas Board of Regents, Oklahoma Board of Regents meet tomorrow on their agenda, conference membership. They sought the invitation, they got the invitation, so they're going to accept the invitation. And then then we'll hear something in some form or fashion for the first time. And then once we are able to ask them questions, the first question is obviously going to be, why the move? When did you think about it? And, what are the ramifications of the move to the university? And, oh, by the way, some of your fellow Big 12 schools that are really mad at you, and now you've got to compete with them for at least one more year. But it sounds like by mid-morning tomorrow, it's that final decision. And then what's it going to look like and when's it going to happen?
Roger Wallace, we'll be covering this for many more days, but also for the rest of the day on KXA News at 6, 9, and then, of course, at KXA News after the Olympics tonight, which I believe is 10:30. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
So continuously developing story, and we will be with you the whole way. Thanks, Roger, for joining us,
All right.
and take care.